The Galactic Council chambers had been many things over the centuries: an arena of debate, a battleground of egos, a playground for bureaucrats who had never seen a real battlefield. Today it had something new: an audience of humans, all smiles, all terrifyingly polite. Jasmine Monroe adjusted the too big ceremonial robe draped over her shoulders, and kicked the tip of her Converse sneaker against the marble floor. The robe was some sort of silk-like fabric that shimmered in the pale light of the assembly, designed to awe and intimidate. On Evie, it looked like she'd raided a wizard's clearance bin at a Renaissance fair. She didn't mind. Let them think she was ridiculous. Underestimation was humanity's oldest, sharpest weapon. Around her, alien delegates shifted in their assigned perches. The council chamber spiraled upward like an inverted shell, balconies stacked in rings, each one packed with representatives from 273 species. There were beings that shimmered like living crystal, creatures who hovered on translucent gas sacks, oil-skinned reptiles blinking their triple eyelids. Every color of the spectrum, every shape, every possible anatomy had sent an emissary to this grand spectacle. All of them had one thing in common: they thought they understood humanity. Evie smiled warmly, tapping the tip of her stylus against her notepad. She wasn't taking notes. The stylus was transmitting a complete security sweep back to Earth's observation ship, parked discreetly outside the station's outer ring. A security sweep that showed, for all the Council's bluster about unity and cooperation, that they hadn't even thought to check the humans' tools. "Ambassador Monroe," came a voice like syrup poured over gravel. The chair being, a shimmering construct of floating prisms called the Varkesh, regarded her with what it probably thought was kindness. It had the same air as a particularly smug high school principal. "We are honored by your species' presence in our council today," the Varkesh intoned. Its crystals shifted slightly, forming a polite bow. "Though you are new, we welcome your perspectives. Should you require assistance understanding our processes, please do not hesitate to ask." Evie grinned and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh, thank you. We're just tickled pink to be here. It's a real honor to sit among so many seasoned civilizations." She gave a little wink. "We'll be sure to ask lots of questions. We're very curious. Dangerous habit, I've heard." A few polite chuckles floated from the balconies, mostly from species that had traded with humans and knew the peculiarities of their humor. The rest rustled uncomfortably, unused to a species that treated formalities like a game rather than a sacred ritual. Commander Trent O'Rourke, nominally the cultural attaché for Earth's delegation, and in reality, head of security for this operation, shifted his bulk slightly behind her. The man looked like a retired linebacker stuffed into a diplomat's suit. His eyes, however, were alert, constantly scanning. He caught her glance, gave a barely perceptible nod. Everything was going according to plan. The council continued with its usual procession of ego-massaging, back-patting, and subtly worded threats. Evie played the part of the naive young ambassador perfectly, doodling little spirals on her notepad, nodding attentively whenever anyone glanced her way. No one noticed the humans' other supposed aides, moving with quiet precision around the chamber's edge. Evie's fingers brushed the inside of her sleeve, feeling the reassuring outline of the communication patch sewn into the lining. At her signal, every human in this hall would become something far less diplomatic and far more decisive. But not yet. Timing was everything. The central conflict, as always, was Earth's formal membership. 2 years ago, humans had been invited to petition for inclusion in the Council, an invitation that was less olive branch and more leash. Humanity's expansion into nearby systems had worried the older races. They wanted humanity close, under observation, preferably neutered by bureaucracy. Evie had studied the Council's history. Every species here had, at some point, been forcibly integrated after showing too much promise. Better a cage lined with velvet than one built with iron bars. Today's vote was supposed to be a formality. A last-minute display of power, to make sure the humans understood who was boss. Which was why General XY Carr of the Threx Dominion was present. The Threx were built like sentient bears crossed with armadillos. 7 feet tall, bone-plated arms, the strength to tear steel doors from their hinges. They had been the Council's unofficial enforcers for the last millennium, ensuring no newly admitted species forgot their place. And General XY had been glaring at Evie for the last 40 minutes, as if contemplating the easiest way to break her. She returned his glare with an innocent little wave. He growled low in his chest, a sound that made a few nearby representatives glance away in discomfort. Predatory displays were technically against council etiquette, but exceptions were always made when it was politically convenient. Evie turned to O'Rourke. "I think someone's got a case of the Mondays," she whispered deadpan. O'Rourke grunted. "More like he skipped breakfast and thinks you're a snack." She laughed softly, genuine. The tension in the room twisted tighter. Humans were supposed to be awed, intimidated. Instead, they were cracking jokes. The chair being floated forward. "We will now hear closing remarks from the honored delegation of Earth." Evie stepped forward, tilting her head up to meet the crystalline entity's core with an easy smile. She cleared her throat. "Thank you, honored beings of the Galactic Council." "We come in peace," she said brightly. A few aliens exchanged glances. Humans and their loaded phrases. "We look forward to learning from your civilizations, and perhaps, in turn, sharing some of our unique perspectives," she continued. "We have found that collaboration often yields surprising results, especially when assumptions are revisited." The subtle stress on the word assumptions was not lost on a few of the more attentive delegates. A ripple of unease fluttered through the balconies. Evie bowed, shallow and respectful. It was, technically, a proper sign of deference. "Technically." The chair being nodded. "Your statement is acknowledged. The vote shall now proceed." And that's when General XY moved. In a blur of bone and muscle, he crossed the chamber floor. The speed was shocking, even to those who had seen Threx in battle. He loomed over Evie, casting a shadow that seemed to blot out the chamber lights. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then XY lifted his clawed hand and slapped her across the face. The sound cracked through the chamber like a gunshot. Evie staggered a step back, the momentum stealing her breath for a moment. Her cheek blossomed red. A few gasps rose from the balconies. Others watched, calculating, waiting to see the human's response. XY rumbled a low, satisfied growl. He expected flinching, groveling, submission. Evie rubbed her cheek thoughtfully, considering. Then she smiled. It was not the bright, perky grin of moments ago. It was something older, colder. The kind of smile predators reserved for the instant just before they pounced. "Apology accepted," she said sweetly. "You won't feel the next part. Most don't." Silence crashed over the chamber like a wave. Up in the balconies, alien dignitaries shifted, unease tipping into something closer to fear. O'Rourke's hand brushed his lapel twice, a signal. Across the room, human aides straightened subtly. Evie kept smiling, turning back to the chair being as if nothing had happened. "Shall we proceed to the vote?" she asked brightly. The Varkesh's crystals dimmed fractionally, the equivalent of blanching. "Perhaps we should break for deliberations." Evie shrugged, easy and disarming. "Of course. We'll be right here." The chair being floated away, muttering a diplomatic scramble into its comms. Other representatives began filtering back toward their private alcoves, casting wary glances at the human delegation. Whispers rose like mist. Already, the narrative was spinning out of control. A young species. A minor provocation. An overreaction. But something about the humans' composure, their utter lack of fear, set every nerve in the council chambers on edge. General XY loomed a moment longer, his hand flexing. He did not apologize. He simply grunted and turned away, confident he had made his point. Evie watched him go, her smile never faltering. "Commander," she said softly, voice pitched for only O'Rourke's ears. "Yes, ma'am." "Catalog every entrance and exit. Quietly. Assume lockdown in less than an hour." O'Rourke smiled, the slow, dangerous grin of a man who had been waiting for this moment far too long. "Already done." Evie nodded, tapping her stylus once against the marble floor. The signal went out. A ghost pulse of data, invisible to almost all council technology, spreading like a whispered secret across the station's infrastructure. And still she smiled, small and harmless, a polite guest in someone else's house. For now. The slap still hung in the air, an invisible wound in the council's ancient hall. Even as the delegates resumed their guarded movements, attention pulsed like a second heartbeat beneath every word, every glance. For the first time in centuries, uncertainty stalked the floor of the Galactic Council. And it wore a human face. Jasmine Monroe sat neatly at her station, legs crossed at the ankles, a polite smile affixed to her face like armor. The red mark on her cheek had already begun to fade, but not enough to be missed by the security feeds. Those feeds were being scrubbed and looped even now by Earth's cyber division. No record would show weakness. Only the moment General XY Carr had overstepped. The exact moment humanity had been waiting for. Commander O'Rourke remained by her side, outwardly unbothered. He tapped occasionally on a sleek tablet, appearing to review notes, but every tap was a coded message, relayed to operatives embedded across the station. Evie glanced at him, catching the corner of his mouth tighten. Their net was almost closed. Above them, the delegates whispered in a dozen languages, musical, guttural, buzzing. Even those who didn't care about the humans a day ago now leaned in, smelling blood in the water, or fearing their own. None of them truly understood what they were facing, not yet. XY Carr paced the lower floor like a restless predator, glancing back toward Evie more often than he should have. He was unsettled. Not by guilt, Threx did not possess that particular flaw, but by confusion. Humans were supposed to submit, to show weakness, to request terms. Instead, the girl had smiled at him. Smiled, and in that smile, he had recognized something familiar. Something he had seen once, long ago, in the mirror before a battle that had almost destroyed his homeworld. He growled low in his throat and turned his back again, trying to dismiss the tremor creeping along his instincts. The council's chair being, clearly rattled, called for an unscheduled recess under the pretense of procedural review. Delegates shuffled away, speaking in hushed voices. Security drones repositioned themselves, unaware they had already been compromised. It was theater. All of it. A play being acted out for the benefit of a dying order. Evie rose from her seat with a stretch, casual and loose-limbed. She took 2 steps toward the center of the chamber, then paused, running a finger along the engraved marble of the council's floor. Her voice, when it came, was pitched conversationally, yet carried to every corner of the hall. "You know," she said, "there's a funny story we tell back home. About a scorpion and a frog." Delegates turned toward her involuntarily, caught by the unfamiliar cadence, the hint of something dangerous lurking beneath the words. The scorpion asks the frog for a ride across the river. The frog's nervous, obviously, because scorpions sting. But the scorpion says, "Why would I sting you? We both drown." So the frog agrees. Halfway across, the scorpion stings him. As they're both sinking, the frog gasps, "Why?" And the scorpion says, "It's in my nature." A small laugh, light and dismissive, escaped her. She straightened, looking up at the balconies packed with alien power. "See, that's the thing about nature," she said, voice sharpening just slightly. "You can't change it. You can only pretend for so long." O'Rourke took a step closer, his massive hands clasped behind his back, postured deceptively at ease. Every human operative in the chamber tensed like a coiled spring. Evie smiled brightly. "And nature? Well, humanity's nature has always been difficult to predict." On cue, the first layer of the council's internal defenses shut down. A flicker, almost imperceptible, but the delegates noticed. The faint hum of personal shields died. The surveillance spheres floated lower, disoriented. Doorways sealed with a heavy hiss, locking with mechanical finality. Panic rippled through the room like a brushfire. The Threx general snarled, his hand going to the weapon slung across his back. He drew a gleaming axe, one designed for ceremonial intimidation rather than practicality. Still, it looked lethal enough. Evie tilted her head, studying him as one might study a slightly rabid dog. "Really?" she said, almost pitying. still thinking in terms of axes and muscles. Cute. XY roared and charged. He was fast. For a creature his size, astonishingly fast. Bone-plated arms swung the axe in a wide, decapitating arc. Several delegates shouted warnings, others scrambled away. Evie didn't move. She simply raised her left hand, thumb flicking a small device no larger than a key fob. The floor beneath XY's feet lit up in a geometric pattern, and the Threx general slammed into an invisible wall mid-stride. His momentum folded him over awkwardly, sending him sprawling face first onto the marble. The axe clattered away, spinning harmlessly to a stop near O'Rourke's boot. O'Rourke nudged it aside without looking down. The geometric pattern expanded, forming containment grids across the floor. Every human device, smuggled in plain sight, synchronized perfectly. Personal stasis fields activated around key delegates, freezing them mid-motion. Alien guards found their weapons fried by directed EMP bursts. Those who resisted were met not with lethal force but with a dazzling array of non-lethal countermeasures. Foam grenades that hardened instantly, gravitic tethers that glued feet to the floor, localized gravity shifts that made standing upright a hilarious impossibility. The chamber dissolved into orchestrated chaos. Evie strolled forward, hands clasped lightly behind her back, surveying the scene like a hostess checking on her guests. Her expression never wavered from pleasant interest. A towering gasbag entity shrieked in 5 registers at once, trying to flee, only to be gently but firmly netted by an adhesive web shot from what appeared to be an umbrella. A reptilian ambassador swung wildly at a human aide, only to find himself stepping onto a patch of the floor that turned frictionless. He skidded gracelessly into a wall. The humans moved with terrifying efficiency. Every advance anticipated. Every reaction countered. No deaths. No overt brutality. Just complete, methodical domination. Evie paused beside the fallen XY car, who was struggling to rise against the gravitational locks pinning him to the floor. She knelt, carefully adjusting the folds of her ridiculous ceremonial robe. "You see," she said conversationally, "we didn't come here for membership. That was never the goal. Too much red tape. Too many rules." XY car snarled wordlessly, struggling harder. She leaned in closer, voice dropping to a murmur. "We came here to take the whole damn playground." The general froze, instinct screaming at him in a way no amount of training could override. Evie straightened, smoothing her robe. Around her, human operatives finished securing the last pockets of resistance. Delegates, pinned or immobilized, looked on with wide, horrified eyes. The chair being hovered in place, its crystalline form flickering with stress signals. "Ambassador Monroe, this is an act of war." Evie turned to face the being, hands spread innocently. "War? Oh no. This is a demonstration. Think of it as community service." "You cannot do this," the chair being protested, voice warping from strain. "The council will not." "You mean the council we've already quarantined?" Evie said, with a sweet, fake-confused expression. "The council whose homeworlds are currently receiving very polite messages from our ships parked in geosynchronous orbit?" The chamber froze. Evie tapped her notepad, bringing up a holographic display. A neat, clean interface showed a network of council worlds, each marked with a blinking green symbol. Earth's expeditionary fleets had moved with the same precision as their operatives on the ground. Not a shot fired. Not a casualty yet. But every critical infrastructure node was now under human control. "You wanted us close," Evie said, voice soft but cutting. "You wanted us under your thumb. You thought inviting us in would make us tame. Safe." She looked around the stunned room, meeting as many alien eyes as she could. "You should have read the warning label." In the upper balconies, an ambassador of the Skiri Confederacy, a species known for their political cunning, slumped forward, realization sinking claws deep into his mind. Others followed, eyes widening, mouths opening in silent horror. They had invited the predator into the henhouse. And now the fox was politely redecorating. The Varkesh chair being flickered again. "You intend to enslave us?" Evie's face registered genuine offense. "Enslave? Absolutely not. That's barbaric. Relief rippled briefly, foolishly. No, she continued. We intend to manage you. Stewardship. Supervision. Think of it as a kindness. Left to your own devices, you were about 2 centuries from mutual annihilation anyway. She smiled brightly. You're welcome. O'Rourke stepped up beside her, offering a datapad. She took it with a nod, scrolling through the latest reports. Minimal casualties, she murmured approvingly. Not bad for a first run. Could have been cleaner, O'Rourke muttered. One of the Avarxi tried to bite Jenkins. Did he bite back? Professionally. Evie chuckled, tucking the pad under her arm. She turned back to the assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, beings and bioforms, this is your formal notification that the Galactic Council is now under provisional human administration pending behavioral review. Stunned silence answered her. I know, she said mock-sad. Change is hard. Her smile sharpened. But we're really very good at it. The humans began moving through the chamber, cataloging prisoners, securing devices, establishing new chains of command with ruthless efficiency. Evie watched them work for a moment, then turned and walked slowly toward the massive observation window that overlooked the Council's core station, an impossibly vast network of spires, habitat rings, and bustling traffic. She placed her palm against the glass, feeling the faint thrum of the station's life systems. Outside, human battlecruisers hung in silent orbit, gleaming and patient. Behind her, the Council trembled. And humanity smiled. The command center of the Galactic Council, once the impenetrable heart of diplomatic power, now pulsed with a strange new rhythm, one set by human hands. Jasmine Monroe stood at the center of the vast control deck, surveying the sprawling view screens with a serenity that made the alien technicians shudder. The humans had not dismantled the station's systems. They had simply assumed command with the terrifying ease of a locksmith slipping a pick into an old familiar lock. Commander O'Rourke approached, a datapad tucked under one thick arm. His suit, rumpled by hours of movement and minor scuffles, still carried the whiff of authority. He offered the pad to Evie with a grunt. She skimmed the display, eyebrows lifting fractionally. They've started reaching out to their colonies, he said, voice low. Soft denials at first. Now they're trying back channels. Emergency protocols. Secret codes. Evie smirked without looking up. Let them scramble. It's good for the soul. O'Rourke grunted again, the sound halfway between agreement and appreciation. He turned to glance at the primary viewports, where human ships drifted like patient sharks. The Council's fleets remained docked or stranded, their command codes overwritten in the first minutes of the operation. They still don't get it, he said after a moment. They think we're here to punish them. They'll learn. Evie handed the pad back and wandered toward the high table, where the core council members had once gathered in solemn deliberation. Now the chairs were empty, the dais cracked where containment fields had flared to life. She rested a hand on the edge, trailing her fingers along the smooth material, feeling the ghosts of 100,000 decisions made in this room, most of them useless. Her mind flicked back to the months of preparation, the endless simulations, the hushed arguments in war rooms buried deep beneath Earth's crust. Humanity had known this moment was inevitable. Since the first radio signals reached alien ears, since the first tentative diplomatic overtures, the pattern had been clear. Integration or domination. Humanity chose neither. They chose to smile and sharpen the knife behind their back. A soft chime broke her reverie. One of the captured council representatives, a Lectari named Vorshi, had requested an audience. Vorshi, whose people controlled 2 major trade lanes and a seat on the council's executive board. Useful. Evie nodded once to the guards stationed at the edge of the room. Vorshi was escorted in, his usually luminescent skin dimmed to a dull greenish-gray, a clear sign of distress among his species. He approached cautiously, large eyes darting toward the human soldiers flanking the entrance. Ambassador Monroe, Vorshi began, voice strained but steady. This development is most regrettable. Surely there is a path forward. Dialogue. Compromise. Evie tilted her head, smiling with the same sweetness she might offer a child caught lying about homework. Of course there's a path forward, Vorshi. But compromise? That's such a complicated word. It tends to mean we get less than we could have taken, doesn't it? Vorshi flinched visibly. Around them, the human aides took careful note of every reaction, every twitch of muscle. We, Vorshi tried, then stopped himself, recalibrating. We are prepared to offer concessions. Substantial ones. Evie clasped her hands behind her back, strolling in a slow circle around him. Concessions. She tasted the word. You mean scraps? Fragments of power you no longer hold. You're not negotiating from strength, Vorshi. You're negotiating from your knees. The Lectari drew himself up, indignation flaring despite the danger. We are the stewards of thousands of systems. Billions of lives depend on our guidance. Evie's smile sharpened. Exactly. And look how well you've done. She tapped a finger lightly against the council table, activating a holographic display. A rolling list of council decrees filled the air, each tagged with its consequences. Famine, rebellion, exploitation, extinction events politely filed away under acceptable collateral damage. This is your legacy, she said softly. 1,000 worlds bled dry because your council prioritized tradition over survival. Because you thought you could control chaos with committees and signatures. Vorshi stared at the list, horror creeping into his features. Evie leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. You mistook complacency for peace. You mistook cruelty for order. You mistook humans for something tame. Vorshi dropped his gaze, defeated. Evie deactivated the display with a flick of her hand. You want a path forward? Here's how it works now. Humanity doesn't ask. We tell. You listen. She motioned to the guards, who escorted the shaken alien away without another word. O'Rourke joined her again, arms crossed loosely. You enjoy that too much, he said. Evie shrugged. He needed to hear it. He's not the only one. Evie glanced at him sidelong. They all need to hear it. Every single one. Outside the command deck, corridors once filled with diplomatic pomp, now echoed with the efficient steps of human soldiers. Delegates were housed in controlled zones, their communications filtered through human networks. Every system, life support, navigation, defense, was in human hands. And yet, no battles had been fought. No worlds had been bombed. The Council's strength had crumbled not from force, but from the careful application of pressure against its own rotten beams. Evie walked slowly toward the diplomatic archives, where thousands of years of treaties and edicts were stored. She traced her fingers over the ancient data plaques, each one a monument to a civilization that had thought itself eternal. Arrogance and memory, preserved in sterile code. A soft footfall behind her made her turn. Lieutenant Mira Chen, one of her tactical specialists, saluted crisply. Report, Evie said. All Council-linked planetary nodes have acknowledged provisional human oversight, Chen said. No organized resistance yet. Scattered local defiance, but nothing we can't handle. And Earth? Earth secure. No sign of external threats. Evie nodded, satisfaction flickering behind her eyes. Good work, Lieutenant. Tell the crews to start transitioning civilian services. Focus on stability first. Minimal disruption. If they hate us, they'll look for cracks. If they need us, they'll defend us. Chen saluted again and withdrew. O'Rourke watched her leave, then turned to Evie. You really think they'll ever accept this? Evie smiled without humor. They'll adapt. They always do. Fear's a good motivator. So is hope. She returned to the central platform, calling up a new display. The galactic map flared to life, a spinning web of systems and alliances now subtly rewoven to reflect human stewardship. It's not about domination, she said quietly. It's about survival. About doing what they couldn't. What they wouldn't. O'Rourke studied her profile, noting the tension at the edges of her calm, the coiled energy waiting just beneath the surface. You're playing a dangerous game, he said. Evie smiled, a real smile this time, sharp, knowing, unrepentant. Only if we lose. Hours passed. Detainees were processed. Infrastructure normalized. Messages were drafted for the council worlds. Assurances of continuity, promises of order. Carefully worded to soothe the anxious, while leaving no doubt as to who now held the reins. Evie retired briefly to the private chambers assigned to her. Spartan, efficient, bare of anything personal. She sat at the edge of the bed, pulling off the ceremonial robe and tossing it aside. Beneath it, she wore simple black fatigues, the uniform of Earth's shadow forces. She pulled a small, battered coin from a pouch at her waist and turned it between her fingers. An old coin, older than her, passed down by those who had fought in humanity's countless, ugly wars. A reminder of who they were. What they were capable of. There had been debates, back on Earth. Loud ones. Whether to integrate, to cooperate, to bow and scrape and hope. But history was a brutal teacher. Cooperation without leverage was submission. Integration without strength was assimilation. And humanity did not go quietly into anyone's night. She tucked the coin away and rose, squaring her shoulders. There would be more work. More battles, even if they were fought with words and treaties instead of weapons. But the first step, the critical first move, had been made. And it had been flawless. A soft knock came at the door. O'Rourke entered without waiting for a reply. "We've finished securing the council fleet," he said. "Admiral wants confirmation on asset redistribution." "Tell him to proceed," Evie said. "Prioritize defensive realignment. Show we're not here to wipe them out. Just to hold the line." "And if they don't believe us?" Evie smiled faintly. "They'll believe when they realize we already own the pieces." O'Rourke nodded, tapping a quick note into his pad. "And the delegates?" he asked. "They stay contained. Limited privileges. We'll vet each one." She moved past him, already thinking 3 steps ahead. Toward the treaties to be rewritten. The alliances to be forged under new terms. Toward the galaxy that would soon learn the true shape of human mercy. "Ready the next announcement," she said. "To who?" "To everyone." Outside the command deck, the station thrummed with the muted pulse of a new order settling into place. Somewhere on 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at unfamiliar stars and felt the subtle shift in the tides of power. Evie stepped onto the broadcast platform. The lights flared to life. She faced the camera, poised and still, the polished diplomat once more. But in her eyes, there burned the steady, merciless light of a predator who had smiled all the way to the kill. She breathed once, deeply. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," she said, voice carrying across every system they now touched. "Today marks a new chapter. Not of conquest. Not of oppression. But of correction." Her words were measured, her tone warm. But to those who listened closely, the message was clear. The old ways were over. The humans had come. And they were not leaving. The council chamber, once alive with the pulse of competing empires, now sat quiet under the careful dominion of Earth. The banners of old alliances hung limp in the stale air, their symbols looking smaller somehow, reduced to relics. In the center of it all stood Jasmine Monroe, a solitary figure clad in tailored black, hands clasped lightly behind her back. She looked almost delicate against the colossal sweep of the architecture. A mistaken impression, and not by accident. Commander O'Rourke stood nearby, the silent, immovable monument he had been since the beginning. Around them, human operatives manned the Council's former control stations, fingers dancing over alien interfaces with the ease of conquerors who had studied every contingency. The takeover was no longer a point of debate. It was a historical fact being inked in real time. Evie moved to the heart of the great rotunda, where the floor's embedded lights cast soft gold spirals toward the vaulted ceiling. She turned slowly, surveying the faces gathered under guard, the captured remnants of the Council's once proud assembly. Some delegates glared in fury, others slumped in stunned despair, a few clung to brittle hope that this was some negotiable setback. But hope was a currency they no longer owned. She raised her voice without raising its volume, cutting through the muttered prayers and curses like a scalpel. "You are all here because you believe the same lie," she said. "The lie that strength lies in tradition. That longevity is the same as supremacy. That inertia could stand in place of vision. A few tried to speak, but the subtle tightening of human guards around the perimeter silenced them better than any shouted command could have. Evie allowed the silence to stretch, forcing the weight of her words into every corner of the chamber. You watched our broadcasts. You read our histories. You saw the wars, the infighting, the chaos, and you laughed. You told yourselves we would burn out before we reached the stars. That we would be too busy killing each other to ever be a threat. She smiled, slow and cold. The kind of smile found in the eyes of deep-water predators. You were wrong. The galactic map bloomed into view above her, casting its blue-white light over the assembly. System by system, new annotations spread, marked not with flags or emblems, but with the simple, elegant insignia of the United Earth Directorate. Control nodes blinked steadily, indicating full compliance. You spent your time building palaces of procedure, monuments to your own self-importance, while pretending chaos could be legislated away, Evie said, circling the dais with the grace of a lecturer delivering a final exam's crushing verdict. Meanwhile, we perfected survival. Adaptation. We learned to thrive where you would have perished. We embraced chaos because we had no other choice. She stopped before General XY, still shackled, pride smoldering in his yellow eyes. You mistook our kindness for weakness, our chaos for stupidity, our laughter for ignorance. She knelt slightly, meeting his gaze at eye level. You assumed we were less because we were loud, because we wore our wounds openly. XY bared his teeth in silent defiance. Evie smiled wider, a flash of something primal and terrifying. We are not less, she whispered. We are more. And we have been playing this game longer than you can imagine. She straightened, turning away from him as if dismissing a particularly unruly child. Her gaze swept the council once more. In your arrogance, you made one fatal mistake. You gave us time. Time to study. To plan. To evolve beyond you. A low murmur rippled through the delegates. Fear, awe, realization blooming too late to matter. O'Rourke approached, murmuring in her ear. Evie nodded once and turned back to the assembly. As of this moment, she said, the Galactic Council is dissolved. All former Council species will retain self-governance under provisional Earth oversight. Non-compliance will be treated as hostile action and addressed with proportional force. Protests erupted immediately. Voices rose in a cacophony of disbelief and outrage, but Evie merely waited, calm as stone. O'Rourke barked a single word in English, and the human guards shifted, weapons snapping to ready positions. Silence returned like a falling guillotine. You are free to administer your own affairs, Evie continued, voice cool and steady. But you will answer to a new body. One capable of ensuring that no more genocides are politely overlooked. No more starvation labeled as acceptable collateral. No more tyrannies cloaked in diplomatic immunity. A Lectari delegate stumbled forward, shaking with rage. You claim to bring order, but this is conquest. Slavery. Evie regarded him for a long moment, then stepped forward until their noses were nearly touching. You enslaved yourselves, she said, voice so soft the room strained to hear. Every time you let corruption fester. Every time you chose personal power over collective survival. We are merely doing what you refused to. The delegate sagged back, defeated. Evie turned, walking toward the Grand Console that had once directed fleets, negotiated treaties, crushed rebellions with the stroke of a stylus. She laid her hand upon it, fingers splaying across the smooth, cold surface. From this moment forward, she said, there is no council. There is only the Directorate. The system responded to her biometric command. Across the station, and on every world linked to the Council's grid, the new orders propagated. Treaties nullified. Command structures reformed. For the first time in known history, the galaxy's fractured powers bent toward a single center of authority. Not because they chose to. Because they had no other option. Evie stepped back from the console, allowing herself a small breath of satisfaction. Prepare the official broadcast, she said to O'Rourke. He nodded, issuing the command. Within moments, The main communications hub pulsed to life. Cameras activated, broadcasting not only within the council station, but across the networks that fed 1,000 worlds. Evie faced the lens, calm, measured, unshakable. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began. "For too long, your lives have been governed by systems designed to fail you. Systems that prioritized power over principle, stagnation over progress. Today, we begin anew." She let the words hang, let the weight of them settle into homes, markets, leadership chambers light years away. "You will find that humans are not conquerors in the traditional sense," she continued. "We do not seek your destruction. We do not seek your extinction. We seek your evolution." She allowed herself a small smile. "Resistance is not recommended. It is not because we are without mercy. It is because mercy without structure is cruelty by another name." She ended the transmission with a simple nod, stepping back from the broadcast station. O'Rourke exhaled slowly, watching her. "That'll put the fear of God into them," he muttered. "Fear is a start," Evie said. "But it's not the endgame." O'Rourke raised an eyebrow. "What is?" She looked out through the massive viewport, to the swirling lights of ships and stations orbiting the Council's shattered authority. "Understanding," she said. "And perhaps, somewhere down the long road of centuries to come, forgiveness. But that was a luxury for another era. For now, stability would be forged with iron and intent." A sharp chime interrupted her thoughts. Lieutenant Chun approached briskly, offering another datapad. "Preliminary reports," she said. "Minimal unrest. Most systems are in shock. Some capitulations already formalized." "Good," Evie said, skimming the data. "Focus on humanitarian stabilization first. Food, medicine, security. If we make life better faster, resentment will have less time to take root." "Understood." Chen hesitated, then said, "There's one other matter. A group of former council members. They're asking for asylum." Evie tilted her head. "From whom?" "From us." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. She handed the pad back to Chun. "Tell them their safety is guaranteed," she said. "As long as they behave." As Chen withdrew, O'Rourke chuckled dryly. "You think they'll behave?" Evie smiled, slow and sure. "They'll learn." She turned back toward the room, where the stunned delegates remained under guard. Some already whispered amongst themselves, calculating how best to survive, how best to serve. Others sat silent, broken by the realization that history had passed them by without asking permission. Evie stepped forward, raising her voice once more. "This is not the end," she said. "It's a beginning. For all of us." She looked each delegate in the eyes, letting them see her not as a tyrant or a monster, but as something infinitely more unsettling. A human. One who had smiled and smiled and smiled, until the blade slipped between the ribs. And by the time they noticed, it was far, far too late. O'Rourke moved to her side as they began the slow process of dismantling the old order piece by piece. "You know," he said conversationally, "I always wondered how it'd feel to win this big." Evie didn't answer immediately. She simply stared out at the vast expanse of stars beyond the viewport. "It doesn't feel like winning," she said finally. "It feels like beginning a war we can never afford to lose." He grunted, considering that. "Think they'll ever forgive us?" he asked. "No," she said simply. "But they'll survive." And in the end, that was what mattered. Forgiveness was optional. Survival was mandatory. She turned and strode away, leaving the shattered remnants of the council and their dreams in her wake. Behind her, the stars turned. Ahead of her, the galaxy waited. And humanity, grinning, relentless, unbreakable, marched forward to meet it,